Their meeting, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we are to the approval of our agenda. Are there any proposed amendments this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion and second to approve the agenda as presented. I will acknowledge our discussion item at the end will be brief. We aren't quite ready for that, and it slipped onto the agenda anyhow, so we'll give you a brief update on where we're at, and then bring that subject back when we're ready for it, for the full discussion.
Is that 8A?
That's 8A, yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Dorsey can.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved for this evening. We have our first citizen comment period, which is for anything that's on this evening's agenda. Do you have any comments on agenda items? Okay, hearing none. We have a second citizen comment period at the end of the meeting for any items. We're to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'd move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We have two presentations tonight. The first is from Bonnie Tufts. She is with the Human Services Division at Kitsap County, and she's here to talk to us about the county's block grant program. And we have an interlocal agreement with the county for that, and it automatically renews, and I think it should be renewed, which requires no action. But I wanted Bonnie to come and talk to us a little bit about what that block grant program is. So Bonnie?
Thank you. So annually, Kitsap County receives Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Program funds from HUD to provide housing, services, community, and economic development activities to low-income individuals in our community. The cities of Paulsbo, Port Orchard, and Bainbridge Island do not qualify for these funds on their own, so we have had interlocal agreements in place with Kitsap County since 1993. We are required every 3 years to recertify as an urban county with HUD, which is what we're in the midst of doing right now. And it requires us to notify each of the cities to see if they want to continue to participate. If the city chooses not to participate, projects that are located within the city boundaries cannot apply for funding for the Kitsap County funds and would instead apply to what's called balance of state funding on a project-by-project basis. So this is a competitive statewide pot of money. Every 5 years, we adopt a new consolidated plan, so we're currently working with our 2016 to 2020 plan. Using a needs assessment and a market analysis, a strategic plan is put in place to establish the goals and the strategies we're going to use over that 5-year period to disperse our funding. To get the funds out into the community, we utilize an annual application process. So we publish a NOFA or an RFP every spring, and agencies submit applications for projects and programs that meet the goals in our consolidated plan. Applications are reviewed by a citizen grant recommendation committee that's made up of appointments from all of the mayors and the county commissioners. They make the funding recommendations after interviewing agencies and reviewing the applications. Those recommendations are forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners. There's a public hearing. The board makes the final decision, and those are included in an annual action plan to HUD to let them know our intention with our funds. So later this year, we will begin our next planning process for our next 5-year consolidated plan. That will be for the years 2021 through 2025. And we hope to continue working with the city of Port Orchard as we identify the needs as we look to where our funding is going to go over that 5-year period. So I know there was a little bit of historical information provided to you as well, so I'm open for questions.
And there has been a little bit of confusion, and in particular, those of us on the Housing Task Force. Mayor Erickson's been referring to this program as the filing fee dollars, and this is not, this particular interlocal agreement is not the filing fee dollars. It's dollars that are coming from HUD.
Correct.
Which are different than what's being referenced to. So I just wanted to, before we didn't take action, which I think is the proper course, I just want to make sure that that you had the information, and Bonnie came, and that we've got it for public record too, that we got this information. So
I just had a couple questions. One of them is, when you get ready to do this 5-year plan, and it sounded like you were going to do that in the fall, who from Port Orchard sits on that planning process?
So we open it up to anybody. The last 5-year process, we came and did presentations to each city council. We'll have some study sessions. We've recently hired a consultant to do a housing market analysis, so we're going to use some of that data. So we try and use as much data as we can, and then have some community meetings to get input on the plan. Currently, affordable housing is really the big topic, so I don't really know if that will change based on what we find out from that consultant, but certainly we invite anybody to come to our community meetings, and we'll make sure we're reaching out to your council and your mayor as well.
Okay, and then my other question is regarding the projects that you have funded. You refer to Conifer Woods Apartments and the Heritage Apartments. Are those in Port Orchard, or are those in South Kitsap?
Those are South Kitsap area. I was giving kind of a broad range of,
Okay, where's Heritage at?
145 West Lippert.
yeah, it's
Yes.
in the city.
Oh, that's
that one
okay.
is in the city, correct? Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
Okay,
It's a Housing Kitsap property.
okay, thank you.
Other questions for Bonnie?
Can you tell us a little more about the definition of low income and very low income? For example, we read that the Heritage Apartments are serving very low income. What's the approximate range? Is it their monthly benefits, or?
Yeah, so low income is considered 80% and below area median income, and then very low moves to 60% of area median income, and then extremely low puts it at the 50% and below.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Are we comfortable taking no action? Okay. I figured we would be. I just wanted to check in with everybody. I appreciate you coming, Bonnie.
Look forward to providing you more information as we start our planning process. Thank you.
For
Thank
coming
you.
tonight. Okay, we are on to our second presentation. We have Josh Weiss, is our lobbyist from Gordon Thomas and Honeywell. So give us an end of session report.
Well, good evening, everyone, and it is nice to be here. Just, I do have a presentation, so 1 second here while we get set up. As the mayor said, I'm Josh Weiss. I'm with Gordon Thomas Honeywell, and I have been with the firm and representing you for, it's been about 11 months now. It has been a very enjoyable 11 months, and with the end of the 2019 legislative session, I just wanted to come and provide you a report and let you know how things looked like they turned out. So, let's see here. Oh, I can do it. So far, so good. I think, as most of you know, just in terms of broad overview, it was a long legislative session. I didn't do that. It was a long legislative session this session, which means that the legislature was adopting their biennial budget. So it was 105 days. They actually finished on time 1 month ago today. They finished on midnight on the 28th, which was the 105th day. They did adopt all 3 of their budgets. Partially, I believe, because the Democrats had control of both the House, Senate, and Governor's Mansion, you did see a record number of bills introduced this year with a 22% passage rate, which is actually pretty high. And if you think about, 75% or more of the bills that are introduced don't even make it through the end of the process. There's a whole lot of activity going on, but in many cases, not a whole lot of outcomes or results. And in some cases, you might think that's a good thing. I will say that, in my opinion, Port Orchard did have a very successful session. In broad strokes, the operating budget, they adopted the highest operating budget in state history. The spending plan for the next biennium spends $52.4 billion. That's about a 20% increase in new expenditures from this current biennium that we are in for another month. They made significant new investments in behavioral health, as well as public employee salary benefits and wage increases. They did, as you probably read in the newspaper, they did adopt a number of new revenue sources in order to pay for this, primarily and really focusing on B&O tax increases. There was also a graduated REIT proposal that did pass as well, but the majority of the revenues were from B&O taxes. The capital budget was a much smaller number, though fairly consistent with where the capital budget typically ends up at about $4.9 billion. And the state does their budgeting, you may have heard this from us before, in different ways than your budget. They do break their budget out into 3 different pots. Operating really is for operating expenditures. You don't see any capital expenditures in that. Capital budget is for buildings infrastructure, but non-transportation capital infrastructure. Transportation includes both operating and capital components, and includes operating sources for State Patrol and Department of Transportation, as well as an infrastructure program for roads and highways. In the transportation budget, there was discussion, you may have heard about this, about a new transportation revenue package that was proposed by Senator Hobbs. That in the end, at the end of the session, was not adopted. They did not move forward with that, primarily because Mr. Eyman is out there with a new initiative that will be on the ballot this fall that would significantly reduce state revenue, and so there was hesitation about adopting and committing to a new list of projects when that ballot could, or that initiative could potentially be adopted this fall. I would very much say that transportation is going to be one of the topics that will continue to be talked about over the next year or so, and I do think a new transportation package, maybe not this next year, but in the following year, is certainly possible. There was generally a shortfall in gas tax revenue, so you didn't see very many new transportation projects funded this session. Your legislative priorities this year are there on the slide. I'm not going to go through each because I have a slide on each of them, but just sort of the bottom line for the city of Port Orchard is at the end of the session, you were granted $800,000 in the capital budget, which is a pretty good return on investment from our perspective. The first priority in the capital budget was a capital budget request for the McCormick Sewage Lift Station, and this is you're all familiar with the development agreement you have with the developer over in McCormick Woods. We asked for $1 million to replace the second sewage station. We met with the members of your delegation in the 26th district prior to session. They were all very supportive of this project. We at GTH developed a handout and also worked with Mr. Dorsey to complete capital budget request forms. And I know that sounds bureaucratic, and frankly, it is kind of bureaucratic, but filling out those forms is really kind of a pain. They are very detail-oriented, and they have very specific things they're looking for. So that, only a few words there, but represents a good amount of work coming up with those forms. Your city was very engaged. Your mayor was very engaged, coming down twice during legislative session, which was great. Councilmember Ashby came down with him as well, and we met with the delegation and with capital budget leaders and talked about this request. We also, one of the benefits you get from us is our literally daily presence there, and really helping not only your delegation remember and keep focused on this request and your requests, but other legislators as well that you just sort of happen to see sometimes in the hall. And so between the two types of engagement, the House proposal came out with $250,000 proposal, so not even close to the full funding request. The Senate, Senator Randall was able to get in $800,000 in their proposal. And in the end, we were able to secure that full $800,000 that she ultimately was responsible for in her budget. Not the outcome we were looking for, but certainly not a bad outcome whatsoever. The second request, boy, you can't even see that, and I can't either. The Sedgwick Roundabout is at the intersection, obviously, of Highway 16 and Highway 160. And this was an outcome, several years of discussion around congestion on Highway 16. The congestion study that DOT did there recommended some investments that the city frankly didn't think were going to address the congestion issue, particularly within the city boundaries. So we asked for 2 compact roundabouts coming off of the freeway at a cost of $3 million each, so a $6 million request. Again, we met with your delegation prior to session, similar legislative activities to what I described before, but we were not successful in either of the proposals in getting this funding. In the Senate, when they came out, Senator Hobbs, as I mentioned before, had a new revenue package. It was included on the list of projects that would get funded if they had gone forward with that new revenue package. But if you recall, that included carbon tax and a number of other revenue sources that ultimately did not go forward. When that did not look feasible, their current law budget, so using the existing revenue sources that they have, didn't include any funding for any projects of this type across the state. The Senate provided 0 for new projects in their proposal. The House came out with a list, it was a small list, but they did have a list of projects, but they didn't include it either. So we really didn't have any, when both the proposals came out, didn't include the funding, we really didn't have any leverage to advocate for from that perspective. Disappointing, given where transportation ended this session, not entirely surprising. There just were not that many transportation revenue sources to, that much transportation revenue to really dole out across the state. So disappointing, but we're having this conversation with a number of clients that had transportation requests. You also had on your legislative agenda support for economic development tools. The Association of Washington Cities made this a priority this session, had Senate Bill 5564 introduced. This was would allow jurisdictions to impose a credit against the state sales tax, which would develop resources for a competitive grant program at the Department of Commerce that cities could apply to. Similar, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the LIFT or the LERF programs, have been prior programs like this. You would go to Commerce, ask for a grant to do economic development projects within your city boundaries. This was not passed, unfortunately. It had a $2.5 million fiscal note in the first year, and unfortunately the legislature, they spent a lot of new money. They were pretty loath to spend money on items that were not their highest priorities, behavioral health, some of those types of priorities. So we saw a number of items like this that frankly wouldn't have cost that much, but they just weren't willing to invest in them. And we'll continue talking with AWC as they continue forward with this legislative item in the future. I should have mentioned any of these bills that didn't pass this session, because it's a 2-year biennium, will be reintroduced, and the legislature can act on them in this next upcoming legislative session in the second year of the biennium. Better news on condo liability reform. Senate Bill 5334 was passed by the legislature. The purpose of this was to better define what a breach of warranty is for a condo project. What we were finding in the state is there was so much liability for developers that there was not individuals willing to build condos. I know the city viewed this as part of an affordable housing a focus, where you really want to try and get people to be able to enter the housing market, and sometimes condominiums are a good way to get into the market, build some equity up, and then obviously be able to move up within the market. So a good thing that was passed this year. And finally, you asked us to continue to monitor any water resource types of proposals that might have an impact on your pilot project that you're doing under the Foster Mitigation Program. And this really, there were hardly any water resource bills proposed this session. Last year, obviously, you know, they dealt with the Hearst decision. I think there was just a fair amount of legislative burn on of water resources, so we didn't really see anything there, but continued to watch for new developments. My final notes, it's been very enjoyable working with you. As I said, the mayor's been very engaged. It's been fun to work with him. You have a good delegation. It is quite fun working with them. Please do thank them when you see them. They, even though not all of our results were what we wanted to do, they really are very passionate about advocating for Port Orchard. And just because they don't always bring success in a project doesn't mean they're not trying hard down there. There's a lot of other dynamics in play that doesn't always mean that they can succeed. And they really do keep you in mind frequently. Just final note there, lobbying's a year-round effort. We've already been engaged with the mayor talking about what to tee up for this next legislative session and how to continue to see success. So thank you very much. We appreciate working with you, and I'd be really happy to answer any questions. Before I get finished, I should say I provided reports on a weekly basis to the mayor throughout the session. They went directly to him. That is working, and I know he was forwarding them out to you. That is working fine from our perspective, but we did talk about it and wanted to say, if you want to receive those directly, I can do that as well, and just let us know if that works, or if you want to have direct contact with us as well. So with that last note, happy to answer any questions.
And issues that we've started to tee up is, one, continuing that conversation about Sedgwick, the compact roundabouts. And if we're successful in getting, a chunk of money from the Public Facilities District, probably our big ask this next session, or at least to lay the groundwork for a future ask, is the community center and that project. So we'll have future needs probably around the pedestrian path, the next phase of the pedestrian path. It's been a few years since we got the Connecting Washington dollars. And we know that real estate prices and construction costs have gone up, and it's been 5 years since we got that award. So construction, it's safe to assume that project's going to cost probably almost double. And then we have some other infrastructure projects like the Marina Lift Station that might be worthy of us trying to get some help on too. So. Questions for Josh?
Well, yeah, I
Councilmember
was
Ashby?
just going to, I know that you and I emailed about this, but council is going to take up at our June work study the single-use plastic bag issue. And I was just hoping you could just give us a little history on that and what your expectations are for it in the future.
Yeah, so this was a hotly debated topic during legislative session, as you know. And ultimately, we did support those efforts. Representative Peterson was really the champion of this, trying to provide a statewide ban on single-use plastic bags. My sense is that he will come back with this. He's a well-respected legislator, known for being able to get things done. I think this is an issue that has legislative interest. Orca recovery was one of the major topics of the session. I don't see that going away, and I think this is tied to that. The legislation that was proposed would have preempted any jurisdictions, but they would have grandfathered in jurisdictions that already had a resolution in place. So, we can talk about that more, but I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing to continue our discussions and think about how to craft your policy within your jurisdiction, knowing that there's a risk you may get preempted.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Josh? I think all of you have, go ahead, Steve.
Do you remember the bill that would have allowed for accessory dwelling units? I think it was like 2 per lot. Did that get discussed, or how did that go?
Yeah, it was discussed a lot. In fact, it was one of the sort of major, considered by cities to be sort of one of the major threat bills of the session. It did not pass. I think it probably will come back for discussion, but the Senate sponsor of that legislation announced 4 days ago that he would not be returning. He's going back to work at Amazon. And so maybe the dynamics change a little bit there. We also, frankly, when I say we, AWC, cities generally were able to stop that in the House Local Government Committee. So I think it's viewed now that there needs to be some pretty serious discussions if that policy is going to go forward.
Communications, I know Josh, you guys all have Josh's email and should have his phone number too. So, don't hesitate to reach out to him or myself, in any of these issues. Other questions for Josh? Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Josh, for coming tonight.
Thanks again. Good to see y'all.
We're going to move to our business items, the first of which is an exciting moment for our city. We have an adoption of an ordinance confirming the appointment of Matthew Brown as our new police chief. And so the mayor is seeking the council's confirmation of the appointment of Matthew Brown to the position of police chief effective July 8th. in your packet is a proposed ordinance. And Matt's here in the audience, maybe after there's a motion and a second, or would you like Matt to come up and address the council first? It's your pleasure, or Scott, you want to?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance to confirm Mayor Patansi's appointment of Matthew Brown to the position of Chief of Police effective July 8th, 2019.
Second it.
We have a second. Before we take that vote, Matt, you want to maybe come up at the podium? I'd like to welcome Matt. He brings 19 years of law enforcement experience to our city. Started his career in Pierce County and the city of Lakewood, and was part of the command staff in Walla Walla County, and most recently as the deputy chief in Paulsbo. I was thrilled with the process that a few of you participated in our community, and we hired the Washington Associations of Sheriffs and Police Chief. They provided us an exceptional pool of candidates, and for Chief Brown's first day on the job will be July 8th, and I look forward to him joining our management team. So with that, Matt, if you would have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, thank you to the mayor and to all of you. This is a long extension of what I've been hoping to do with my professional career. But in addition to thanking you guys, I have some other folks I want to thank, if I can have just a couple of minutes. First off, I want to thank my wife. She's been supportive of me throughout my career and supportive of me continuing to take additional leadership positions, and that can be hard. So without having her there to support me, I wouldn't have been able to do this. I'd also like to thank the chiefs and mentors that I've had and continue to have. They provided me really strong guidance on how to lead ethically and face the challenges that we face in this career. In the next several months, what I'm hoping to be able to do is get out and listen and get out in the community and speak with people, speak with you folks, and kind of see what direction you would like to see your police department continue to head, continue to stay on that path, and if there are any additional directions that you would like us to go. I've already met with a number of the officers from the police department, and I can tell you that Chief Martai has put together a really, really solid team. Some of what I plan to do also in the next few months is also sit down, talk with them, and listen to what they have to say. See what directions they would like to take their department, where they feel that they have their strengths, and how we can continue to reinforce those. One of my solid beliefs is that the core tenet of law enforcement is the relationship and the collaboration that the officers have with members of the community. And if I'm not out there and talking to you guys, and they're not out talking to you guys, we're not going to take our team in the direction that it needs to go. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be a member of the team.
Welcome. So, but we plan on the 9th, we'll have a ceremony here at the beginning of the council meeting for the Chief Brown's swearing in. So, that, we have a motion and a second. Questions of myself or of Matt? Councilor Clausen.
Not so much a question, but just a comment. I had the good fortune of participating through the process that was established, and congratulations for coming out on top. And I will also say that the process that was used was, in my opinion, outstanding. So I think this is evident of that process, that we have a wonderful individual that's coming to join our team. So compliment you, congratulate you.
Thank you
for the effort.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right. With that, we have a motion on the table confirming the appointment of Matthew Brown as police chief for the city of Port Orchard, effective July 8th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the chief is confirmed. So we are on to our second item this evening, which is adoption of an ordinance approving an employment agreement with Matthew Brown as the city's chief of police. Can I get that one to me, too? Get to it. Okay. Early this evening, you confirmed my appointment of Matthew Brown to be the chief of police for the city of Port Orchard. I'm seeking it to to enter into an employment agreement with Mr. Brown. The agreement has been provided to the council ahead of time. It's not part of the packet, but will be published after your approval. With it being made, and see here, I was ad-libbing there. In addition to the contract, the job description and salary scale have also been provided. The agreement will be effective this evening, and with the first day of employment being July 8th, 2018. Mr. Clausen.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance approving the Chief of Police employment agreement with Matthew Brown effective May 28, 2019, with the first day of employment being July 8, 2019, and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe. Questions, comments about the contract? Okay.
I didn't see anything in here about non-competes, which is fine. I just know there's new state laws talking about non-compete clauses within employment contracts. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything in there that maybe we had old
Defer
language
to
in
HR,
there,
the
but
attorney on that.
I didn't see anything in there.
Generally, for this type of position, there wouldn't be a non-compete clause included.
I didn't see. I just wanted to double check to make sure. Great.
I mean, he can go out, I think, chalk tires too. And, we won't hold him back, as long as he's doing it in the city of Port Orchard. Thank you for your question. Other questions? Okay, with that, you'll be voting on the adoption of an ordinance approving an employment agreement with Matthew Brown as the city's chief of police. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the contract is approved. Congratulations. So we are on to our third item, adoption of an ordinance authorizing a utility manager and a public works operations manager. And with us tonight is our new human resources coordinator, Debbie Lund. She brings 20 years of HR experience to the city, and we're excited to have her. Deb Howard was difficult to replace, but I think we've done a pretty good job. So with that, turn this over to Debbie.
So in your packet, you'll see and have probably heard we are losing a valuable member of our Public Works Department. And as we sat down as staff and looked at the duties that we were asking that individual to perform, we realized it was really more than what one person could do successfully here at the city. So with the Public Works support, we kind of thought about what do we need in that role, and decided it really is two roles: a supervisor of our labor staff out in the Public Works shop that can manage and direct that workflow, and then somebody who would bring the technical expertise to make sure that our water resources and stormwater and sewer utilities stay functioning. So that is the proposal in front of you, would be to add one FTE to the budget. From a cost standpoint, the current position funding would mirror that of the operations supervisor, so no additional impact to general fund. The new utilities manager would be funded fully out of the utility funds, and so that would impact the utility fund. Your finance director has indicated that those funds can sustain that.
Councilmember Lucarelli.
I move to adopt an ordinance which adds 2 positions and eliminates 1 in the Public Works Department. This restructuring will enable the Public Works Department to better manage its resources and help to fulfill the department's mission of providing quality public works and facilities.
Second.
Motion and a second. Just say, you know, we've got so many projects going in Public Works, and we really need also, another component of this is to create a better safety program out in our Public Works Department, where our shop crew, we recently had an incident, and Labor and Industries was a bit critical of our safety program. And we really don't have anybody in-house that can create that type of program or strengthen the one we have. And so that's one of the strengths I think we're going to need to find when we go to post this job tomorrow and start to interview people. We really need somebody that has a strong HR and management of a group of people, and safety, has implemented or worked with safety programs, because that's an area of weakness that we have that we need to strengthen. The other side of that house is we've got a well being drilled. We've got a McCormick lift station that we're going to go to construction later this year. And then we're starting within the next year, the Marina lift station, and most likely another well project in the McCormick area. So we've got to have somebody that's staying on point on those projects, and it's really just too much for one person. And Thomas, while it's difficult losing somebody of Thomas's caliber, it was a point in time where we needed to step back and reflect on what is it this guy's doing, and we were probably really asking too much of Thomas. So that's not why he left. He got a wonderful opportunity as the Public Works Director in Port Angeles. So with that, other questions of me or for Debbie? All right, I have a motion and a second, I believe. So with that, you'll be voting on the adoption of an ordinance authorizing a utility manager and a Public Works operations manager. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are on to our fourth item, 7D, adoption of an ordinance sponsoring Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization membership into the Association of Washington Cities Risk Management Service Agency. Clerk Reinerson.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. So discussion was held on the April 9th council meeting regarding a request from the Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization to sponsor them into the membership of the Association of Washington Cities Risk Management Service Agency. It was noted that a jurisdiction who is currently with AWC RMSA can sponsor another jurisdiction by adopting a resolution. The city wishes to sponsor the organization.
Councilmember Ashby.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution sponsoring the Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization membership into the Association of Washington Cities Risk Management Service Agency.
Second.
Motion and a second. Councilmember Ashby is the motion maker. Would you like to speak to this?
Yes, we passed last meeting, I believe, the ILA that was updated for the Peninsula RPTO. And this is very similar to the KRCC request. We're the only city within the Peninsula RPTO that is eligible to sponsor, and that's why we raised our hand and said we would be glad to. They, in the past, have not had E&O insurance, and the risk assessment person felt that this was the best opportunity for them. So we're bringing it forth for our council to sponsor.
We did get a letter from Dennis Engel from WashDOT stating that they had no claims in the last 10 years, so that's accompanying their packet to AWC. So, Councilmember Clausen?
Yes, I just wanted to, and I'm not quite sure if it's an issue or not, Madam Attorney, I wanted to verify that in my position at Kitsap Transit, I represent the transit system on the board who would then be provided this E&O insurance that the PRTPO will eventually acquire from AWC. It's just convoluted enough that I wanted to at least raise the issue, and if you or anyone or any of you object to me participating in this discussion and vote, I would step down from the discussion, but I at least wanted to raise it.
I personally don't see any issue there, but it's certainly appropriate for you to make that offer.
Okay.
Does anybody in the public have a concern or on the council with Councilmember Clausen voting on this item?
No.
I don't see a conflict either, so, but thank you for bringing
Thank
that
you.
to our attention. Okay. With that, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions? With that, you'll be voting on adoption of a resolution sponsoring Peninsula Regional Transportation Planning Organization is for membership into the Association of Washington Cities Risk Management Service Agency. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We are to our last business item, an approval of the May 14th, 2019 council meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of the council meeting of May 14th.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Lucarelli. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of those minutes? I think I'll have an abstention by Councilmember Diener. All in favor?
Can't vote, so.
And I won't vote. How's that sound? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And one abstention. All right. We are to our discussion item. And Mr. Dorsey, this will be brief. We're going to bring this back at a future date when we've got more concrete plans. We thought we were farther along, and our consultant brought us some new thoughts. I think it was Thursday, so I neglected to get it off the agenda tonight, but it doesn't hurt to talk about it just a little bit.
Right, so on the Marina Pump Station, it's at this level, it's a pre-design level. We had a number of alternatives 1, 2, and 3 with different variations, A, B, C, D. At one point, we were ready to bring alternative 1A really back to say this is really what we think is the most viable alternative, because it allowed for moving ahead with the project now, staying in its current location, but providing an alternate route to the east such that it wouldn't encumber the zone that a future parking garage might utilize. But as we were looking at that from a plan view, and even a section view, it worked out pretty well until we realized that there was one component that's actually much deeper that has to do with the generator, fuel storage, and things that you would actually have to build now, and it'd have to be deep enough to be under the lower level of the parking garage. So we decided to take a time out, not to present that right now. We want to work through a few more details, but I think we're honing in on really a preferred alternative. You know, we'll mention the other alternatives in passing, but I think to get into too much deep discussion on all the alternatives, I think that'll be pretty self-evident the direction we're going. You know, we're rectifying our solution, not being held back by other decisions that need to be made, but at the same time having enough foresight to not, paint ourselves into a corner, so to speak. So that's what we'll be presenting next month. And we also, today, we actually met on the downtown storm plan, the grant that we had, the $212,000 grant that we had to deal with the storm drainage, flooding, and water quality issues. So we actually kicked that off today. We're working on that scoping, knowing that we'll try to, coordinate the two projects the best we can. So I guess at this point, it's just more to come.
Really what we'd like to make sure that we aren't in the way, whether it's the project we see on the wall, or if that doesn't come to fruition, it's a future project that we haven't put these large pipes and very expensive infrastructure that would maybe need to be moved. We don't do that. Now, on the other hand, we have to weigh, what is it going to cost to move those pipes, and that's part of the analysis we're going through. And as we heard, there's some generator components that have to be located too, and we have the sea out there, so we can't go too deep. So at least cost effectively. So more to come. So we are on to committee reports. So thank you, Mr. Dorsey, for that update. Finance Committee, I think maybe later this evening we could plan a meeting. Well, the finance director's not here, so
Right, we'll have to
we'll
determine
circle
what
back
the
and
date,
plan
but
a meeting, yeah.
The only thing I think we discussed there in the work session, pretty much everything that we mentioned at or talked about at the last Finance Committee meeting. I think the only thing was the actions that we took tonight. We did, at the Finance Committee level, talk about the breakup, if you will, of what was Thomas's position and creation of two positions. And for what it's worth, now that we've taken action, the committee was in support of that action, so.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to Economic Development and Tourism.
Yes, our next meeting is June 10th, 9:30 here at City Hall.
Okay. Utilities.
Our next meeting is June 17th here at 9:30, City Hall.
Okay. And Sewer Advisory.
Not until August 14th, but that will also be City Hall.
Okay, Land Use has had trouble scheduling, and we just found out today that the meeting date you picked last week the staff wasn't available on that date, so.
Right, so July 1st is our next scheduled meeting
That's what I'm hearing.
at DCD.
All right, and anything from lodging tax?
Sometime in the near future.
Okay, we're holding our breath. Chimes and lights.
Actually, we have all of our work done for the time being, so we're taking off the next 2 months. Our next meeting is August 19th, 3:30 PM here at City Hall.
Notice those fabulous electrical outlets you have in the
You
new Rockwell
betcha.
Park for your Christmas lights.
It's going to be beautiful. Right.
Outside agencies, anything to report there? I was spent today, most of my day at the Housing Kitsap Board Retreat. Probably the biggest topic there, and it's kind of in my mayor's report, is the county, the agency is, I guess I had to get kind of firm to the county, and I got, I don't know, as it relates to, we really have two courses of action. The county's gonna amend their loan agreement with the agency, or they're gonna force us into bankruptcy. So so I held firm on that position for the city, and I said, I know very strongly how our city council feels about paying for that debt that the county has, and they are not supportive of that. So that was probably the most contentious issue. We finally, after a year and a half, have financial statements. They've been set off to the auditors last Friday, which is a big deal because we've been operating not only in an agency in financial difficulty, but the software system blew up and we've been somewhat operating blind. So it's better, things are much better, is what I will say. To the mayor's report, let's see here. We looked at a couple of federal transportation grants, and in particular, lighting and sidewalks for downtown, and possibly for the Salmonberry roundabout. We checked in with a consultant, and they just told us it would have cost us about $10,000 to have some consultants help with that. And fortunately, they were very honest, and they said it wouldn't be money well spent without complete designs. We really need to spend the money on design for either one of those projects for it to compete. So I think, as we do the biennial review, we need to keep that in mind and maybe fund one or both of those designs so that we can start looking for grants. Ribbon cutting on Rockwell, June 14th, 2 o'clock. And Jesse Young has confirmed that he will be there. So that was everybody's preferred date. And we're going to do that at 2 o'clock. AWC conference is the last week in June. And I know Councilmember Ashby's attending. I'm a board member, so I'll be attending. I have a board meeting that Tuesday of that week in Spokane. Love anybody else that would want to go to the conference is welcome to come. You got money in your budget to do that. And so I will miss that council meeting. So Councilmember Diener, you'll need to run that meeting, the last meeting in June, because I'll be leaving.
Or
Okay.
myself as Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, you're the mayor. Why do I get that? I'm sorry. Last year?
Because I did such an awesome job.
You did the, okay.
He did.
Okay.
Yes, I intend to go over Wednesday morning,
Okay.
so I would be here on the
Okay, Councilmember Ashby, the mayor pro tem. Sorry about that. Okay. Need to run that meeting, the last meeting in June.
She did such a great job the last one that she did.
I know it.
Yeah.
So we didn't tell you yet, Beck?
No.
Whoopsie.
All right.
Yeah.
I missed that meeting. So, the Affordable Housing Committee, thank you for Councilmember Ashby who attended that. And Councilmember Clausen's been there at that meeting too. Did I send that email to all of you or just the two that attended the meeting? They are, I think I know what your answer is, but they're looking for us to declare pass an emergency declaration for inclusionary zoning at our next meeting. And
I didn't hear that.
it was in the email that got sent to me, and I highlighted it when I sent it out to you guys.
Oh, I guess I haven't read that. I did not hear that at that meeting.
It was something that they were exploring what all the requirements were.
But
they
that
didn't.
was earlier.
Yeah.
The last meeting, they had representatives from Housing Kitsap, Housing Bremerton, Bonnie was there, the woman who spoke this evening. They had 6 or 7 people there that are specialists in housing, talked to us. And the takeaway I got from that meeting was from Bainbridge Mayor Cole Medina. And he said the group, we need to figure out what we can do collectively. And it came down to money and land is what he was talking about. And money would be collectively, we could lobby for money for programs, and then finding land. And I looked around the city of Port Orchard in my mind, and I don't know that we have an abundance of land. So those were what it came down to. No one, I have not heard, unless I chose to selectively not hear, the discussion of declaring an emergency. That was a topic earlier, so that they could ask for, put a tax measure on the ballot.
Gotcha. Okay, so I missed that last meeting, but it did come, that's what showed in the meeting notes that came
Okay.
to me, and it says immediate next steps, and that was one of the things that it listed for the next steps, and
I will look for that email. I don't remember seeing it.
okay.
And as Beck mentioned, when it was brought up previously, I think, Mayor, you summed it up very well from at least my personal perspective. Until we can pass a property tax to build a new school, I'm not really interested in doing a property tax that's going to build more affordable housing. So we got to get our priorities right.
I know, and just my personal opinion, I'm not sure that we have an affordability issue in the south end of the county that the north end has. And I know that the county is conducting a study, won't be done till next year, I don't believe, or the end of this year, that will quantify that, the affordability, they're measuring that.
Right, and I thought that that was a real important element for us. They were actually, I think, the county and the city of Bremerton are doing this analysis of what is the actual need and where and how much is there actual affordable housing. I went and talked to all of the apartment buildings in the city of Port Orchard, and we rent 3-bedroom apartments in the city of Port Orchard, what a single bedroom rents for in Silverdale. So I'm having a hard time seeing an emergency in Port Orchard. Do we need more affordable housing? Probably yes, but not to the extent of asking our taxpayers to contribute to that.
Another, and should I put Sharon on researching this? There's a House Bill 1406 that was just passed this last section.
Yes.
That'll allow us to carve off a piece of existing sales tax revenue and put it to affordable housing. And if we don't take action, I believe the county can take that on take all of it on. And we just want to make sure that we're comfortable with the county taking that and putting it to work, or that we can do that better. And possibly, my immediate thought was we're part of a housing authority that's struggling, and they provide subsidized housing in our community, and we should maybe be helping them. And this might be a way that we could help them. And don't have all the facts, but we'll get them. And moving on, is other questions about that
I was
subject?
just going to comment on that. What I remember hearing on that is it's not an additional tax, but the legislature is allowing us to take part of the sales tax.
Correct.
That's already collected. And Councilman Clausen's questions is then what is not getting paid for?
Yeah. That's true. All right. Moving on, I've got one of my planning commissioners, Marcus Lane, that I recently reappointed, has stopped coming to the council meeting, the planning commission meetings, and hasn't been responsive. He's out of compliance in his Open Public Meetings Act training, and we've notified him of that. We wrote him a letter today and went out certified mail asking if he wishes to still be on if he resigns, then we don't have to take any action, but once he's appointed, and I've appointed him and you've confirmed, there's a process we have to go through to remove him from the planning commission. And so starts with a public hearing, and that will be at the June 11th council meeting. And I don't know that we'll take action that night, but we'll at least conduct that hearing and then thereafter take action. I hope to hear from him, but he is kind of checked out. So, and we need people engaged in that very important work they do.
Did he perhaps move away?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. We're sending a registered letter, so we'll know pretty soon. But, you know, we've let him know that we plan to conduct a public hearing if we don't hear from him. We'd like him to participate, but he needs to take the necessary training and come to the meetings. I've had a couple, you know, with all these cool parks we're building, a couple requests for putting benches out and maybe naming parks, and I wasn't thrilled with the idea of maybe naming our parks, but I said I would bring it back to you guys. We talked about that a couple of years ago. You know, if there's any desire to do that, I think once we get some of these this pathway, section of the pathway in the park done, there might be opportunity to engage with a nonprofit, maybe to place some benches. We could do it ourselves. Our procurement processes make those benches really expensive versus partnering maybe with a nonprofit that could get them much cheaper than we could. So in return, maybe Kiwanis or Rotary has their name on our bench, and then in memory of somebody on the bench. So if you're comfortable with that. And that's all I have. That was a lot. Department heads. Mr. Dorsey, do you have anything to share with us? Words of wisdom?
Well, I know that McCormick Park's water park was active this weekend. I don't know how that went. So
Went great. I got comments at Rotary and other places in the community today.
So we're closing out, we did the final punch list. I think we're ready to just be done with that one and let the contractor loose. And then basic pedestrian path, there was a run, the Seagull Splat that used segment 2, 3, 4, and 5, I believe. So I think that went well. And so the same thing as we're waiting the 21 days for asphalt cure to stripe, some fencing, and we're pretty much done there. The most important thing is really we're looking at doing the final paving in June now instead of July for Tremont. So that's the 3 nights of road closures of Tremont, the first night being the most impactful, where that's closing both on-ramps and off-ramps at 16 in Tremont for the first night. So we've got a meeting scheduled with all the, emergency aid state folks to really coordinate that first evening and then the subsequent evening. So probably at the next meeting, will probably be just before we're getting ready to pave. So that's an important, and I thought we reached out to the school district, but well, we didn't, because it's 7 p.m. to 5 a.m.
No, I was just wondering what the date you think the tentative date might be.
Don't know yet. Okay. Sometime in June.
If you could do it after the 18th, I'd love you.
Okay, well, it probably will be after I'm thinking mid to late June, but we'll be putting up reader boards in Gorst and between Mullinex and Sedgwick. And we're also going to put one on, I think we're going to put one over by Berry Lake Road, give people options. So yeah, that'll be the last significant intrusion in people's lives, I think, for Tremont at least.
They're disassembling the dewatering apparatus that was mostly gone today. And
yeah, they're getting the wells out. They're prepping it for the paving prior to the overlay.
I noticed a wayfinding sign directly in front of a yield sign on one of the roundabouts. This seems to be sort of problematic.
Yeah, that's it. The one yield sign's a temporary sign.
Gotcha.
So, and speaking of signs, so we're ordering the Rockwell Park sign, and it's not cheap. So if we're not naming it Rockwell Park, I'd like to know sooner than later.
Rockwell Park works.
Is Rockwell Park work with everybody?
I think it warrants a discussion more so than here. If you want to talk about it now, we can, but I think that might be worth a work study discussion.
Okay.
Okay, and then I will
We're going to
put the purchase on hold.
Put the purchase of the sign, if hopefully we didn't pull the trigger on that. But, yeah, they're not inexpensive. Okay. Can you add that to the work stay? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it would be worth it.
All right. Anything else to report, Mr. Dorsey? That's it. Okay. Anything from HR? Debbie?
I'll just say, I'm very happy to be here. I've been here a month now. A great staff, very welcoming, very patient as I learn the ropes here. So just credit to all of you who've had a hand in all that. And I'm just very happy to be here and look forward to serving you.
Sharon, do you have anything to share?
Not tonight.
Okay. Brandy? All right. With that, we are to our second citizen comment period. And sitting here patiently waiting to address the council. Come on up. If you could identify yourself for the record.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. I am Patricia Lemley, President of the South Kitsap Senior Center up at Gibbons. And today I brought a contingent with me of some very fine ladies. We came here to remind you that we are there and we exist, and don't forget about us. Kind of wanted to tell you a little bit about us. First of all, we are eternally grateful to the county for providing the Gibbons Community Center for us. It's been wonderful. Without them, we wouldn't exist. And then there can never be enough thanks to the Rotary for what they've done for us recently. They literally have brought us out of the old into the 21st century. We have a new TV, computer, printer, all new furniture, and then they've come down and worked really hard to put it together for us, and we're very, very happy with that. But because they've done that, we're growing. We've got people that love to come down to that center now. And Port Orchard sure could pitch in and help us a little bit. Our community center, which is all of us, needs a little bit of help from our town. So anyway, what we provide to people right now are all sorts of activities. I brought a copy of our bi-monthly newsletter. I'd like to bring to you, to give you each, to kind of look.
If you hand them to the clerk, she'll definitely get into all of us.
That kind of shows you some of the things that we offer to people. Woodworking and yoga, we have a memory writing class, a book club, we have a little library, we have knitting, watercolors, singing, you name it, and it's a lot of fun. A lot of people are taking advantage of that. We do so much that you can imagine it's quite a strain on the volunteers. Everything we do is done by volunteers. Even our budget is managed by volunteers conducting money-making projects such as raffles. We have a low entry fee into the center, only $12 a year, in order to make it accessible to people. But we do it all ourselves, and we've always been proud of that. But because we're growing a little, we really could use some help. Right now, there's a lot of people that come down there, and we're only open when there's an activity. And activities are ongoing all the time, but we'll have to lock that door up when we leave. So there's an hour or two where we have no one down there, here and there. We would love to hang a sign out on the door that says, we are open every day from 9 to 1, or 10 to 2, or just a part-time position. And that would require us to have somebody that can come down there and sit at the desk, answer the telephones. We get phone calls that don't get answered. Maybe manage the new website that the Rotary is providing for us, or Facebook, answer questions, that kind of a thing. So we're hoping that you think about that. Well, you guys have encouraged this. Port Orchard is growing. You all know that. And if Port Orchard's growing, we're growing. Not only are we growing, but everybody in this room is getting older every day, so we're growing that way too. So we need to look after our seniors. I think that a lot of people don't have the opportunity, or don't even realize we're there, to come down and spend time with other people. And senior citizens, what they need most is a feeling of usefulness and being needed and the socialization. There's nothing sadder or lonelier than a daytime TV. People need to connect with each other. And we're happy to provide that. We always have. We've got hard-working team down there of directors and officers, but any little bit of help we can get from the city of Port Orchard, especially the help to augment the work that the volunteers do, would be wonderful. A mentor, someone to kind of advise us on things, because we're not versed in a lot of things. You can imagine, we're ex-shipyard workers and secretaries and teachers. We need somebody that can tell us a little bit more about what's going on and how to apply for it, that kind of thing too. So anyhow, here we are, and don't forget about us. I don't know if you have any plans in the workings for us. If you do, we'd sure like to hear them. Thank you.
One thing I can tell you is the community center project that we're talking about, we most likely a third of that space is a library, a new library, a third of it is conference space, and the third of it is we don't know. And when I went up in Kingston, thank you, the Kingston Village Greens facility, and toured that there's a peak component of that community center is a senior facility. And so as we start, if we're successful in getting money from the Public Facilities District, we're going to engage in a public process, and we would definitely want to hear from you and how we could possibly create a new center for you on our waterfront and part of that
Really?
facility. Yeah.
A new center dedicated specifically to seniors?
As part of it.
A part of it. It would, so there's, we need to hear from the community and what
Sure.
the community wants.
Well,
to
I
see
tell
that.
you, we're 200 strong, and we would love that. If it were a room, because what I'm concerned about on a community center is you can use it on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and these other groups using it. We have our own library. We have a lot of pool tables. We have a lot of facilities that if you had room for it, that would be great.
Yeah, and I encourage you, as if this gets off the ground, and I'm working hard to try to make that happen.
Great.
I would love for you to engage in that process, because I think that it could be a vital piece to what we're proposing.
We would love to engage in that process. So I'm going to guess, have you got a way to contact us?
If you got your information to Clerk Reinerson,
I'll
we'll
be
make
sure and give
that
it to her.
happens.
Okay, that sounds
right.
good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming this evening. Others wishing to address the council? Jerry?
Thank you. Earlier, when you were talking about the HUD housing and working on facilities and that, my sister-in-law came up from Arizona about a year ago and wanted to move up here. And she only has Social Security, and they went from Olympia up through Port Angeles looking at housing, and basically they want 2.5 times your intake, whatever you make per month. And most people on Social Security have an average of about $1,600 a month, and didn't qualify for any place other than maybe Sylvan Way, the nice little apartments they have over there. So one of the things is there's a disconnect on what is low income. And all of a sudden my sister kept saying, I know why there's so many people out on the street. They can't afford to even get into low income. And if you're not on the I-5 corridor, there's no shag housing, nothing that is, at a better price. So the price that's being charged on low income has a real difference on what low income people are making. So just consider it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Others wishing to address the council? Okay, we are going to an executive session. We will take no action after the executive session. You're welcome to hang out, but we'll be having an 10-minute executive session to discuss potential litigation matter pursuant to RCW 42-30.110, 1I, and a 10-minute session to discuss a real estate matter pursuant to RCW 40.30.110, 1B. And no action will be taken on either item after the executive session. So